All right, so both players on a mulligan to 6. Justin Parente up top, last is at prowess player in the field. Also our first seed against Casey Miller, the number 4 seed on Jeskai control. No turn 1 play for Parente, and a Thundering Falls giving Miller a bit of selection.
No one drop, not ideal, but I think it's really important on the turn 2. Do we have something here? This is way more important. If you don't have a 1 or 2, it's terrible, but the Corey Steelcutter has arrived, and that is the strongest card in the deck.
Right, for a lot of, this is the namesake of the deck, more or less.
Right. It is a card that can be vulnerable. All your threats are vulnerable to temporary lockdown, but it is the one that kind of forces the Jeskai Control's hand on that. You need the lockdown.
All right, so turn 1, Miller had a bit of a thought, or a think rather. Ben Dashiko very quickly left the top card on this turn 2 Meticulous Archive, but not much else to do on 1, as we see back on Parente, opt into Parente thinking about a second spell maybe.
Parente had an untapped blue source that was not used on that first turn. This is something that we've seen, I like to emphasize in the Prowess deck. Saving your spells until you are getting something back from them. Prowess triggers, and importantly, making sure you can trigger your Corey Steelcutter, saving an opt for that purpose.
And Swift Spear being the follow-up to Opt, kind of communicating that that's probably what came here, and I understand why Parente was maybe a bit hesitant to keep it.
An interesting decision to commit a second threat into a potential temporary lockdown, but there is representation of maybe that one main deck Spell Pierce here.
All right, well, here's the third land from Miller, and a temporary lockdown.
There are 4 of them.
All right, it resolves. Miller at 17, back to Parente. What pressure can Parente find?
Parente really wants to get back on the battlefield. Unfortunate to lose 2 cards to the lockdown there. Both players mulliganing, and then that kind of exchange hits you. It's less of a thing when both players are on 7. But every card matters as you get into a leaner game.
And here's Storm Chaser's Talent. That's not bad.
Gets a threat on the table. That's the most important objective for this turn.
Land number 4 hitting the table for Parente, which is okay whenever you have the Storm Chaser's Talent.
Unfortunate to have that 4th mana and just no stock up, nothing to do with that. That was a perfect window for a card like that.
All right, well, speaking of a perfect window for a card like that, here's Beza giving Casey a little bit of life, a lot of elk.
A lot of elk. That one is tough for the Otter to attack through.
Kind of gamey.
Another one of those cards that makes Slick Shot Show Off better in a matchup like this than Draycatcher. Just flying over it is the easy way out. I say easy. 21 damage is a lot of damage to do.
Yeah. All right, so here's an opt from Parente. Shout out to him for having the OG opt.
Oh, yeah.
All right, here's a land. Tapping for leveling up Storm Chaser's Talent to pick up opt while the coast is clear to do so.
This is a matchup where if you can get there, level 3 on Storm Chaser's Talent can be huge. There's a lot of hurdles to get over. It's not just spending all the mana. There are all these temporary lockdowns, 3 more in the deck, and also the 3 copies of Get Lost can be a massive problem to get through.
All right, well, Casey's going to get a lot of looks for Get Lost, casting stock up after getting it untapped with Beza.
And the thing is that you prioritize to beat Storm Chaser's Talent, going to level 3, are already the cards that Miller wants to have in hand. An extra lockdown is good just against the Prowess deck. Get Lost, yeah, you want to have spot removal. Not a big ask to set yourself up against that.
Oof, and here's the control deck with the second untapped source, which, surprise, is blue. Passing the turn with nothing to do with that mana.
Oh, shucks. Just gotta pass.
All right, here's the 6th land for Parente. Unfortunately, a Spire Bluff Canal. And a pass back. Lightning Helix goes after the Otter. Makes some sense. Sunbillow Verge was the land that Miller left up there. Kind of communicated a red card was more important.
And I like the way that Miller's prioritizing using the mana. That 1/1 Otter was not threatening to cross the finish line, but you're probably going to want to kill it eventually. Using all your mana is great.
Ooh, speaking of using all of his mana, Casey Miller gonna go ahead, deploy a Shiko to the battlefield, flashback, quote unquote, a stock up. It looks like Parente's thinking of spell piercing.
Might be thinking about opting to try to find the one Spell Pierce.
Sure. Okay.
I think if you have the Spell Pierce, there's not much to think about. I could be wrong, but stock up seems like about as good as it's going to get.
Right, right. And you can feel these players know there is an invite to the World Championship on the line here.
The stakes are high.
In a lot of ways, this matchup Magic can just validate so much work that went into this event. They've already punched their ticket to the Pro Tour, but the World Championship is that thing that you can just say, no, yeah, I've played the World Championships at this.
Oh, yeah. Such a cool accomplishment. And you have to be feeling two things, right? There's so much already accomplished.
Yes.
You're in the top 4 of the regional championship. You locked up a Pro Tour invite, but there's still so much more on the line.
Okay, so here's Into the Floodmaw, gifting a fish to Casey Miller, and bouncing Temporary Lockdown, returning Corey Steelcutter and Monastery Swiftspear. Parente continuing to respond with that opt we know about, which is going to bring a monk with it on the Corey Steelcutter.
And this makes sense why Parente had so much to think about, because you want to use the Into the Floodmaw before you opt if you're going to do it, so you get that monk token on your second spell.
Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, this makes me feel like Parente might just have something like Monstrous Rage rotting in hand.
Yeah, 24 is a lot.
24 is a lot, and this could give Parente the ability to trade in those Monstrous Rages to actually get Miller off the table. Because
right.
Shiko plus this Beza is a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm. And if you're clinging to Monstrous Rages, your odds are starting to look long. Every turn the game goes longer, Parente feels it slipping away. But converting the Monstrous Rage into some damage, into a monk token if you use it very proactively, it's at least giving you a shot at the game. Even if you don't like your odds, it's better than waiting because it's just getting worse every turn.
Right. Whenever you see Miller have the ability to chunk in for this much damage turn over turn, the actual chances you have to draw out of this, maybe get a little bit lucky, dwindle substantially. So we see that stock up resolves, a Thundering Falls. Miller likes what he sees on top. Back to Parente.
Parente cannot be thrilled about that. Battlefield's already pretty tenuous. Stock up resolved, card kept on top with a Surveil.
Right, right.
Just adding up brick by brick.
Into the Floodmaw really making a name for itself this weekend.
Yeah, I don't think that it's for nothing that the Is It Prowess deck still in contention has 3 copies in the main deck. It's a very versatile answer to all the things that can go wrong for the Prowess deck.
All right, so here's Sleight of Hand, starting the turn off for Parente. You can see Miller getting a die out, so we know how much prowessing has been occurring. Is that the starter 99 Sleight of Hand, or is that Portal?
That would be Portal.
Portal? Yeah.
I'm partial to 7th edition myself.
Or wait, no, I think that one's starter. It's White Border.
Portal is also White Border. Or wait.
No, I think
think
Sleight
you're
of Hand is Portal's second age, which is Black Border.
You're making a lot of sense.
Maybe. If you're in the chat, make fun of whoever's wrong.
Yeah.
Especially if it's me.
Also make fun of whoever's right just to make it fair.
Yeah. We got to stay humble. Right. Look, here's the next spell. Looks like a Storm Chaser's talent, which is going to bring a couple of creatures with it. One is an Otter with Prowess. One is a Monk with Haste and Prowess, thanks to that Corey Steelcutter. And this looks to be a serve for 8, excuse me.
And so this is committing more into a potential temporary lockdown, but it's exactly what I was saying. You just have to try something. Just limit the window where Miller can have it because the game's slipping away no matter what you do.
All right, Miller doing the blocks that one would assume. We see Shiko go in front of the smaller Monk, Beza go in front of the bigger one that does not have the cutter attached to it. Monstrous Rage on the Monk that doesn't have an equipment. So that is an additional prowess trigger to the whole team. +3 from Monstrous Rage. Here's Monstrous Rage number 2.
Pushing a lot of damage. I like it.
And that's going after the other Monk. So we got some monstrous rolls. Lot of damage.
And really forcing the action on a potential sweeper.
Right. So in a lot of ways, this is basically making it so this temporary lockdown is going to leave nothing on the battlefield instead of Casey Miller getting to actually just wipe Parente's battlefield and chunk for 8.
Yeah, we do know that that lockdown is going to come back off of the Into the Flood Maw and just saying, all right, well, at least you're not going to kill me immediately.
All right, so these monks are actually, these are chump blocks from Miller.
Oh, yeah. That stuff's going away.
Relax. I'm sorry. I had kind of, I was like, yeah, that's kind of a lot of damage. This is, wait a second, was this maybe a lethal attack if Miller didn't block?
Yeah, there was 10 toughness in the way.
Oh my god, okay, Miller to 14, untapping. We know there's a temporary lockdown in hand. And all of a sudden, I'm wondering if another Into the Flood Maw is just lethal.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was starting to think about. You know, the temporary lockdown happens here. There are 2 more Into the Flood Maws in the deck.
Okay.
You just do it on the opponent's turn. You get so many prowess creatures immediately, and you get the cutter back.
Okay, it looks like Parente doesn't have it immediately. Pass back to Parente, untap, draws to 1 card in hand, passes back. And this is exactly what you talked about. Parente just needed to make something happen. These draw steps Parente is having, he just gets the luxury of time now because he isn't facing 8 points of damage.
Right. In terms of card exchanges, recommitting into a known sweeper in that way, yeah, that's pretty unfortunate. Action, however, was pretty forced, and he did clean up those giant monsters. So, treading water, but when you're treading water, you're not yet drowning.
Okay, Parente takes another draw, passes back, Roiling Dragonstorm from Miller, discarding a split up. Miller realizing sorcery speed conditional sweeper, probably not what this game is about anymore.
No, not so much.
Limb number 8, pass for Miller, back to Parente, up to 3 cards. Parente looks like he drew a cantrip, sleight of hand. Can trip or cannot trip. There is no try.
Do trip.
Oh yeah. Still got it. That is a starter.
Yeah. I was leaning in to look at the set symbol.
We both leaned up. That is a 9th edition sleight of hand, though.
Could be 8th edition.
Ooh, could be. And look at this. This is actually the Omen half of Meringue River Regent in Coil and Catch. We've seen Miller use this a ton over the weekend, actually.
Yeah, and I definitely want to call attention to Miller's patience there. I was trying to piece together, okay, what can be in the hand? Because we're not committing any copies of the additional Bezas, the additional Shikos. There's a couple Meringue River Regents, and Miller's really prioritizing making sure that he has interaction for whatever happens. It's not really about closing the game. It is useful and good if you can do it. It just takes time, and making sure that you don't lose is a higher priority.
Right, so much of your opponent being in 19, Miller is still in the staying alive part of the game. This is the area where Parente has 6 lands in play, doesn't want to randomly get combo killed, and now Miller finally finds room to cast the big version of Meringue River Regent.
Parente asking, do you want to bust your lockdown?
Right, friendly advice from one competitor to another.
You have an option. You did not declare. I just wanted to know.
No, for sure. Right. Everyone plays the deck differently. Parente with the 7th land. Miller waiting until there are 3 lands after the region has me thinking that this is a 3 steps ahead.
Sure smells like it.
Only a couple of those in the deck, but we are at the point of the game where Dispelling Exhale is going to struggle to do very much.
Yeah, I couldn't even catch a stock up here.
Right.
Despite beholding a dragon.
All right, so here's that Roiling Dragonstorm. Discards a land.
I don't need too many more of those.
Ooh. Little Quarry Mountain Monastery from Casey Miller. Pretty nice one.
Yeah.
Chunks in for 6, Parente to 13. Oh, God, 2 of the sleeves stick together. It looks like Parente accidentally saw the 2nd card down during the draw step.
These things happen. Judge will sort it out pretty quickly. That Quarry Mountain Monastery, though, it's really slow. It doesn't come up in a very big way in the matchup. We get to the stage in the game where Miller just has the mana to play with. It's pretty close to drawing an extra card a turn, and that's something that gets really demoralizing on the Izzet side of the matchup.
Right, this is a card where we've seen how strong something like Desolate Lighthouse can be at being colorless and still just letting you loot for 1 fewer mana on the end step. This costing, an extra mana and just putting you up a card as long as it isn't too reactive. If Miller hits something like Split Up or Temporary Lockdown, probably not casting it.
Right.
But outside of that, even a Lightning Helix going upstairs is pretty nice.
It is really important that the land activating every turn, meaning that extra card, is just on the house. It's just free. We watched a little bit of gameplay with bottling effects, where we saw a red aggressive deck, potentially exiling 2 cards to play next turn, and that material matters. But with this Quarry Mountain Monastery, Miller just has free access if he wants it.
It looks like the judge is just making sure the card or cards from sleight of hand that are supposed to be on the bottom are still on the bottom, I believe.
Yeah, you want to make sure that cards that are known to be on the bottom stay there as we sort out seeing an extra card and making sure that what is drawn here is truly random.
Just basically tracking how many cards are on the bottom of the library at this point that are known. This feels like one where it's pretty clear both players are fine. This is just sort of a dexterity error and more or less just want to try and get the game repaired as quickly as possible. Normal stuff.
Yeah, this is going to come up over the course of realistically a tournament of any length when you're playing games that last so long. So you're drawing a card every turn, and you have all these cantrips. I have personally run into the problem when we started getting into this era where Sleight of Hand and Opt are legal in the same format. Maybe you have another cantrip. Sometimes you just end up resolving one as if it's another, because we are in round 17 of the tournament, functionally. This is not round 1, all right? These players are mentally fatigued. There's so much happening, so many moving parts. This stuff just happens, and it just takes a minute to clean up.
Right. All right, perfect. We're going to get back down to the match. Judges have resolved it. Let's see some gameplay. All right, so welcome back. Here we are in the thick of it. We've seen Casey Miller just starting to turn the corner with a river region from the Meringue River, specifically.
The Meringue River.
The Meringue River.
What a show of strength. Miller not even going to activate that Quarry Mountain Monastery. Doesn't need it.
It feels like at this point Miller just has a wall of counter magic in hand and just doesn't want to ever have a spot where the game can slip out of his grip.
Yeah, no reason to take the shields down. I have all of these cards, and they'll be good to cast when I cast them.
So Parente just took a draw and passed, didn't have a land. I think we see 6 coming across. Oh, this is interesting because we're getting to the point in the game where it might just be an Into the Floodmaw. Yeah, there it is. Into the Floodmaw, gifting a fish, targeting Temporary Lockdown on the end step.
Were this to resolve, there's immediately 3 prowess creatures under that. But we don't got to think about that.
3 steps ahead, just using its cancel mode. Not even drawing more cards from Miller.
Don't need them.
Why? All the good ones are in hand.
Especially if you're trying to think about a situation where maybe you have another copy of 3 steps ahead on Miller's side, and you just don't want to find yourself in a position where you might get caught on anything under Spell Pierce.
Yep.
It's really unlikely that it's going to be game-losing, but why take that chance?
Right, so frequently this comes down to something we've said a lot about Opt being cast at sorcery speed, where it's you don't have to do it on your opponent's turn, it's that you can. The same can be said of cards like 3 steps ahead, where you don't have to draw cards. I understand that sounds like a good thing to do. But if cards are not the access that you're going to lose the game on, and mana is, prioritizing having 2 lands available to play around Spell Pierce, just like you mentioned, is so much more valuable. And Casey is the caliber of player who is going to recognize that.
Yeah, and Miller is somebody we've covered a couple times now, and the way that he navigates the games, clearly understands and pays respect to what matters in the game. And Miller is playing this go long Jessica control deck and acknowledges in most of the game that's just not going to be him clocking his opponent.
Right.
Figures out what the thing that actually matters is and prioritizes that. He's been navigating this tournament beautifully.
Yeah, very, very, very clear idea of what the games this deck wins look like and executing on that plan.
And I am certain that Miller has played this matchup a few times in this tournament.
Right, this is not an accident. As a matter of fact, I believe Casey won this exact matchup about, let's see, 20 and a half minutes, about 22 minutes ago.
Number of turns have passed since we saw that big recommittal on the temporary lockdown. Parente actually has a decent holding of cards in hand now. Has at least one more turn of being attacked by the River Regent, but really has to start thinking, okay, I need to win now or next turn? What do I need to do on this turn if I need to win next turn?
Right, it's really scary where if you're in Parente C, you know Shiko can do the Snapcaster Helix U thing.
Right.
So for a control deck, this does have a sort of haste creature. It isn't exact haste or as much damage as normal, but yeah, there it is. Instep Lightning Helix, Meringue River Regent coming in. The last copy of Into the Floodmaw tries to bounce it 3 steps ahead from Casey Miller, is going to give him the first game of this semifinal match and put him 1 step closer to the World Championship.
And that's huge for Miller, breaking serve here.
All right, looking up to the sideboard, I think specifically Parente is someone who is looking to change a lot of the cards in his deck. What can he do at this point?
Yeah, you have some stuff like Burst Lightning that's really not playing here. You have access to some counterspells in the sideboard, so Parente likely reaching for this Disdainful Stroke. That's one seems pretty excellent. A couple Spell Pierce can play against some of the more meaningful cards in the matchup. The Ral Crackling Wit is pretty significant here. It is a threat that does not get caught under temporary lockdown and helps you play these games as they go along. It's another top deck. You know, once we got that position where Parente had nothing on the battlefield, then you start to really need cards like Stock Up, like Storm Chaser's Talent, and Rail is a little bit more in that category.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think we also saw Witch Stalker Frenzy being a great way to actually change the way your removal operates in this sort of matchup, where the creatures don't feel like they're the most important thing, but then all of a sudden you're at 16 and they're attacking you for 4 every turn, and you really don't want them to be doing that.
Yeah, there are shapes of that game where Miller had those big 5 toughness creatures where Parente can fight through that and win. You know, this one didn't go that way, but post-sideboard, Parente has more tools to fight on that axis.
How do you feel about Ghost Vacuum in the face of Shiko?
You can reach for it. It is fairly narrow there. The Disdainful Stroke gives you a little bit of a tool there. The Ghost Vacuum, really, a card like Relic of Progenitus I'd be pretty into, and a big part of that is you get your card back.
Sure,
you
so
know,
it's
obviously,
like another cantrip almost.
Exactly. The fact that the Ghost Vacuum is just going to be Ghost Vacuum and it gets caught under temporary lockdown, I think it's going to be really tough to actually convert that to being worth a card.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we are actually getting word from our backup match. It sounds like Michael DiBenedetto Plummer has already won and advanced to the finals, punching his ticket to the World Championship, back from the Regional Championship in Charlotte top 8 with a vengeance.
Yeah, huge congratulations to Benedetto Plummer, punching the ticket to Worlds. Hard fought, well earned.
Right, right. All right, so looking at Casey Miller's side of the matchup in the sideboard there, I like this Pyroclasm.
Yeah, but there's actually a lot of cards to like here. You have the Kutzel's Flanker. It's kind of a flash threat that does some interesting things. The Exercise is an answer to Corey Steelcutter. Authority of the Consuls is a tool you see in all of these blue-white X decks to kind of push back against Corey Steelcutter and play in that way. Tishana's Tiebinder is not nothing. You know, it can turn off a prowess creature's ability, can interact with Storm Chaser's Talent, so it's a fine card. A lot of useful tools here, to be sure.
And I also just want to give a really quick shout out to our sponsors. That's Beckett and Dragon Shield. I know we've sung their praises kind of all weekend, but they've just been in the game forever, and they're keeping tabletop Magic alive in 2025.
Yeah, definitely. You will find all of my cards in Dragon Shields.
Yeah, it's just sometimes with these you go, I don't actually know how much I've used this. Dragon Shield is not. That is not the case. This is something where I've been using this for 25 years, 20 years, something like that.
I bought a case of Black Mac Dragon Shields this week.
2 days.
A case, 10 packs, not a pack. A case.
Right. A case. That is not a colloquialism. That is a defined term. It was a case of them.
Yes.
All right. So big thank you to those folks. And looking at our matchup, I really want to highlight, I love how Parente kind of picked a big spot in game one where it did not end up working out. But I do think that was a fairly prime example of a player taking a match, or let's say a situation where they were 1 or 2% and putting themselves at like 10%, which is still not favored, but you have a lot more opportunity to actually put yourself in a position to get lucky.
I think it's really easy to become resigned to your fate when you find yourself empty-handed, throwing your removal, your pump spells into a known sweeper with your opponent at 14 at the end of it. But Parente made a show of it, and I believe identified the line that gave him the best odds to try to win. Yeah,
I think that was one of the most poignant examples of a player creating a situation where they could get lucky that I've actually covered in my time as a caster. It was a spot where, again, players, you talk about creating your own luck a lot of the time, and that can be a hard thing to grok or actually see very concrete examples of, and I think that was a spot where Parente otherwise was very far behind, was kind of under fire from a couple of attackers larger than anything in his deck, and found a way to say, okay, I think your average draw is better than mine, but this way we're going to get more draws, and a wider range of things could occur that way. So I could get lucky if this breaks my way, and as it stands, I am in the middle of losing otherwise.
Right.
See, Parente, unfortunately, mulliganing to 6 here. Miller with a 7. He's pretty happy with.
And the equation for game one was Parente on the play, Miller on the draw. Both players mulligan to 6. Miller won that one on the draw and now starts up a card. Casey Miller has to be thrilled about his position here.
And I really appreciate so that in between rounds, you were saying Miller's got the eyes of a killer.
He's got those killer eyes.
Like the cut of his jib. You can see he's kind of looking down going, yes, my opponent is mulliganing to 5. I am up a game. Deep breath. It's not going to go to my head. This is just another game.
Right. And Miller has been dialed in the entire time we've had him on camera.
Yeah, a lot of extremely disciplined plays in really high-stress situations. I know we saw this in the backup match, round 14, when Casey Miller was up against someone who top-8'd the World Championship last year. Right? Doing a lot of stuff that we thought was kind of unorthodox, playing very crisp, very tightly, and it ended up paying off in a really big way, in ways that, if you've played the matchup a bunch, might seem obvious, but it does require that level-headedness to execute on.
I will not hear anybody say that Casey Miller did not earn this position.
Exactly. I think this is Parente going to 4.
You are correct.
Oof. Oh, yeah, I just saw him mouth the word 4. Oof.
Yeah, I mean, this position is not impossible for Izzet Prowess, but it is pretty unlikely.
All right, this is one where you're thinking to yourself, what, 2 lands, show off, stock up, cross your fingers?
I want to see turn 1, Monastery Swiftspear, tapped and attacking. I want to see turn 2, Corey Steelcutter, and I want to see nothing remove these permanents from the battlefield for 2 more turns.
Okay, well, how about Shivan Reef Stormchaser's talent?
It's a start.
That's close. That 4 cards.
Yes.
4 cards. All right, Sunbillow Verge, Authority of the Consoles. Oof.
That's tough.
That card kind of, it isn't literal card advantage, but it's so much life, it feels like it.
Yeah, when you talk about a deck like Izzet Prowess that needs to chunk in for these great chunks of damage, in a game where you're on low resources, you have less of big combo turns and more of needing to deal a bit of damage over many turns. Authority Consoles gets a lot stronger in a game like that.
All right, well, sleight of hand, 2 with the Otter, and second land from Parente. The game's going to continue. Pyroclasm takes out the Otter.
Top 8 players, please meet our judge at the appearance board near the beach mat.
All right, so just a few land drops going back and forth. Miller happy to go ahead and get a 1-for-1 with that Pyroclasm because of how few resources Parente has access to at this point. Basically saying, I lose a resource, you lose a resource over and over as a game Miller is happy to play when he's up 3 or 4 cards.
Yeah, Parente has to demonstrate that he has some tools to compete with a 7-card hand.
Yes. Okay, so Storm Chaser's Talent, gonna go up, pick up a cantrip. Parente trying to undo a mulligan. Miller happy to take a turn to stock up. Authority of the Consoles really enabling this sort of thing.
Yeah. You got some breathing room. You're not going to take any damage next turn. Any haste creature is just going to enter tapped anyway. And stock up is the kind of card that Parente kind of needs to claw into this one. So we cannot be thrilled to see Miller resolving that.
So something you brought up last game, I think it was last game, the third chapter, level 3 rather, of Storm Chaser's Talent. Really nice in this sort of situation. It's something that can give you a bunch of sort of just extra resources.
Yes, if you can get there, if you can keep it on the battlefield, you can overcome a lot of card disadvantage. These are big asks, but it is possible.
Okay, so Quarry Steelcutter, 5th land, stock up. This does not look like a Moldifor on Parente's side.
Yeah, this is a good exchange.
Wow. This is we're kind of going, yeah, this is a Moldifor. We're going to go through the motions, but this is a whole game on our hands.
Yeah, now we're in a position where you're starting to force the action on a temporary lockdown. You can't be under that Storm Chaser's Talent or that Quarry Steelcutter.
All right, well, land number 5, full text plains. Chico stock up.
Parente, at least at this point, has resolved a stock up. So it's not just being buried by that. But that Authority of the Consoles, it's going to make it really difficult for Parente to chunk in for meaningful damage on the following turn.
Right, so much of what this prowess deck lives and dies by is kind of the threat of combo. Quote-unquote combo, where you just have a bunch of burst damage from hand and haste creatures and prowess and so on. Authority of the Consoles makes it so hard to do that without basically losing the haste mechanic. All right, here's Sleight of Hand.
You can realistically make this Monk a 5/5 this turn. Starting from a mulligan to 4, you know, there's not that many cards in Parente's hand, but Sleight of Hand can find Sleight of Hand, can find Opt.
Monk's already at 3/3.
Yeah. Stock up plus 1 more spell gets you there, and Parente would love to have a stock up.
All right, Sleight of Hand. Gonna make a tapped Monk.
And this is where you see a decline to re-equip. No good to give the cutter to a tapped Monk. But you still get to make the token.
Which means Miller gains a life. Back to 20. Oh, the attack for 3. Do you respect Monstrous Rage?
It's an attack for 4, right? 2 spells plus the cutter.
So true.
Similar situation.
Well, okay. To nag myself for a second, pretty different.
I'm the prowess half full guy. I
know. All right, so Miller declines to block, goes to 16, takes the 4, untaps with Chico, Sunbillow Verge, the play. And I do like preserving Chico whenever it feels like any sweeper means that Miller gets to just keep a threat on the table.
Right. Blocking there, if it's just like Opt, is just throwing the Chico away.
And here's temporary lockdown from Miller, which you can see some of the equity with the card because it is going to get authority of the consoles off the table.
Right.
Who does this help more?
Definitely helps Miller more. One thing about that is your authority is gone now, but the big answer to the temporary lockdown for Parente is going to be into the Floodmaw, and that puts the authority right back into play. It doesn't matter on end step for the Storm Teacher's talent re-entering or for making a monk immediately, but it means you can't go to your turn and make another monk meaningfully.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Though, here's another Steel Cutter and another Storm Chaser's talent. Oh, and look at this. Tap tokens. It's
Hooray!
all right. Here's the 2/2 monk attacking. Miller says, "Fine, you got me. I'll block this time." Monstrous Rage on the monk. Get Lost on the monk. Spell Pierce on the Get Lost.
Okay.
Oh my God!
We're getting something going.
And all of a sudden, is this what, a 5/7/5 monk now?
It's not small.
I think I got the power and toughness right this time, boss.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, that Spell Pierce is huge. And this is what's so interesting about these games, is even though they have so many cheap spells, it feels like you're fighting over double and triple spell turns, you are slowly building a bunch of tension as you commit that mana, and eventually Spell Pierce says, no, 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 no. That is not happening.
Right. I'm going to be casting a bunch of spells on my turn. You're going to have to do that to keep up. That gives Spell Pierce play as the game goes along.
Right, and there it is. Look, Monk with a Monstrous Roll and a Corey Steel Cutter attached. All of a sudden, Parente looks ahead on the table.
And Miller is officially in a zone of danger. 14 is an achievable number from 2 prowess creatures.
You know, I feel like everyone who's played Magic for a long time has their one really cool, hey, let me tell you about this time I won on a Molar 4 story. I mean, I know Dredge and Tron players have a lot more of them, but, you know, decks that don't necessarily plan to do that, it's starting to look like Parente might get the coolest one ever.
It would be incredible.
Ooh, but here is a Beza. Little bit of fish, little bit of life. Too many cards in hand.
Too many cards.
Too many cards.
A real problem.
Appreciate Parente having fun with a lot of this stuff, doing the, oh, look, Mondo hands. Okay, Storm Chaser's talent going up. Response from Miller, Get Lost.
And the talent does need to be on the battlefield to actually pick up a card when you get to level 2. You don't get there with Get Lost happens.
All right, map being cracked onto the monk. And this monk is no joke if both of these end up giving counters. Opt on top.
It's going to move the monk up to a 4/4 natively with the monster roll and the steel cutter equipped.
Whew. And it has base trample thanks to that monstrous roll.
Yes. And the steel cutter.
Of course.
Still tough to cut through a Beza, though.
Of course, of course. Pretty gamey. I'm here all night. All right, back over to Miller. Opt stays on top.
And there's that Quarry Mountain Monastery. This might be a game where we see it grab some cards.
Right, all of a sudden, the good hits for Miller off that card, it feels like they have him thinking about doing it now. Oh no, that's that 5-ball. Chico from hand. Get Lost on the monk token. Oh my god. All of a sudden, Miller taking over the battlefield. Comes in for 6 with 2 fish and a Beza. Otter trades for a fish? No. Chumps blocks the Beza. Three maps on the table for Parente. Untapping Opt, the card about to come off the top.
And you don't feel good about blocking that Beza. The reason to do it you're not necessarily sure if you're going to be able to block next turn. And if you just take 4, you're facing down the
Lethal.
Beza again next turn, yeah, and the
Right.
Shiko. Just too much damage.
Right, some of it is how reliably you can actually convert that chump blocker into blocking. All right, here's Draycatcher for Parente. Spire Bluff Canal, the tap here. And you can feel Parente trying to say, okay, how do I win from here? What do those games look like? All right, map onto the Hatcher. Get lost again. This is the 4th get lost of the game. 3rd copy, 4th cast. Opt off the top. We knew that was in hand. That's going to trigger the Quarry Steel Cutter. This is in response to Get Lost.
And with Miller only showing 1 mana, a Spell Pierce here could be meaningful for Parente if you can find it.
All right, opt. Card to the bottom. Next card to hand. Hatcher to yard. 4 maps on the table for Parente. All right. Monk looking at the map. Goes exploring. Spell Pierce the next card. Oh my god.
Brutal.
All right, well, that's a counter on the Monk. Top card, another Quarry Steel Cutter.
And because
I believe we should be down to 2 maps.
Because Parente converted that chump block with the Otter last turn, it means that he does not have to do any blocking with this Monk, and is trying to find a way where you take whatever attack comes to you next turn and then see if you can convert this Monk into some damage. I mean, 14 damage is the number he's looking for.
Ooh, and it's so tough. Look at this. Parente has to bin the Quarry Steel Cutter. This is not what this game is about anymore. All right, here's stock up from Casey Miller. Looking at 5 fresh ones up top. Saw a lot of blue and not in the land kind of way. Those cards.
If Miller could have access to a Lightning Helix this turn, he would have a lethal attack. It would force the Beza to be chump blocks for that not to be the case, which I don't think we would see in this situation.
Okay, Thundering Falls. Land for the turn. Surveilling. Card on top. All right, 8. Coming across. Parente going to fall to 4. You can feel the reluctance reaching for the iPad. Draws the card. Picks them up, and that is Casey Miller punching his ticket to the World Championship. You can see it wash over him. What it means to win that match. Unbelievable.